Well, hello there, friends, and welcome back to another wonderful episode of Carpo's Bullshit Rambles on a Saturday in April, sometime in the year 2022. Hope everyone's doing well today, and I guess I would consider this maybe a preamble to a video that I want to do later, or rather, a podcast that I'm going to do later. I can't discuss all the things I would like to discuss in a YouTube video because the YouTube police, woo, 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 they like to tell you exactly what you can and cannot say. And I've thought a lot about this lately, how we self-censor and aren't willing to speak our true feelings and how we really think because of A, feedback from people, but B, feedback from these lords of technology that decide to tell us what's appropriate and inappropriate at a certain time. For example, if you talked about COVID and the lab leak a year ago, you'd have your video pulled instantly. You talk about it today and, oh, it's okay because it's now been discussed by some of the mainstream outlets. And one of the most frustrating parts about speaking my mind on YouTube, and somebody asked me this earlier, so it kind of opened it up. They said, hey, how come you don't make videos about Kratom anymore? And I said, well, because YouTube deleted them and basically shut my channel down for talking about Kratom. And they said, well, why can other people talk about these? Some of these other big channels can still talk about it. And I was like, yeah, that's a good question. It has to do with the fact that they get ad revenue for YouTube. YouTube doesn't really care about values or morals or integrity at all. Google does not give a shit about that at all. Not at all. All they care about is revenue, and revenue comes through controversy. We know this. This is why the media talks about controversial topics. YouTube is well aware that when they censor a lot of people, that it's not for anything in particular that they've done wrong, but rather because it goes against the current narrative. And that's about as far as I'm going to get into that today, at least on YouTube, but I'll be doing a podcast about this bullshit later. But to answer the question of why certain people can't talk about certain things and that the mainstream outlets can, it's because they have, privilege, if you will. The larger of an organization you are, the more privilege you have because of the more income you're going to bring in to YouTube. So here I am, a philosopher on YouTube, unable to talk about philosophy. And when I say philosophy, I want to define this. It means the love of wisdom. That's the pure definition of philosophy. That word has been so tainted and twisted that nowadays when you say, oh, I'm a philosopher, a person's going to probably think, oh, they took a college course in philosophy and now they think that they're, an expert on thinking. And I've read a lot of articles about how philosophers are looked upon by their counterparts in various, let's just say, if you go to a college and you put a group of people with their various studies together along with a philosopher, it's going to be, oh, that guy that, just studies the way people think and always has some way to say, maybe that's not the correct way. The point here is that I am a philosopher and I'm owning it because I love wisdom, I love knowledge, but not for the sake of being better than anyone, not for the sake of ever gaining a foothold over other people in society, but for the direct opposite, for the fact that if I have a better grasp on the world around me and understand myself a little bit better, then I don't let other people's bullshit affect me, all right? Like the way that we perceive other people. It's like, I thought of this earlier. It's like, I'm not a hoarder. I'm a collector of things I like. I'm not an addict. I'm a connoisseur of substances. I'm not cynical. I'm a realist. I'm not rude. I'm just honest. I'm not arrogant. I'm just confident. And side note, that confidence is often knocked down because of the fact that I'm a realist and I'm honest. That confidence is really in knowing that I know nothing. I take the Socratic method, if you will, and at the same time I'm somewhat of a stoic. I try not to let other things affect me from the external. Every time that something affects me mentally or physically because I'm frustrated with the situation or I get angry about something, I sit back and do some self-analysis and say, who is gaining from this? No one. If I'm losing my cool over a situation, then I'm failing because I'm not able to properly conduct myself or convey my message and how I feel. And at the same time, the other person is always going to feel like it's a competition if you're arguing and trying to prove yourself. So ultimately, philosophy to me is thinking about life, presenting your opinion and your view on it, and if other people have a different view, saying, cool, and walking away from it. I'm also not godless. I just don't believe in your particular God. I'm not an angry person. I'm just aware of what's going on around me. And I'm not a fool. I just like to play one. I like to be the fool. I like to run around and act like an idiot. I like to wear hippie clothes and get dirty and get goofy and take psychedelics and talk about shit that doesn't matter at all. But it does matter because everything ultimately matters. There are some unspoken inner thoughts about life that we just cannot seem to discuss as humans. Things about maybe frailty or self-depreciation. The fact that many of us put ourselves down because of who we are. Many of us don't look at ourselves as the same as everyone else. That we feel like we're somehow missing out or losing out because we don't keep up with the Joneses, if you will. And I think that we all have to work our way out of that to realize that our way of life is our way of life. And like philosophy is not a class. It's not a college course. In fact, I just scoff when I hear about people, talking about philosophy as, oh, I took a philosophy course. Okay, so you were 19 years old and you took a philosophy course at a college. Who gives a shit? I mean, that's not going to give you an understanding. It's just an entry into how to think. You don't learn anything taking a college course in philosophy. Let's put it that way. All you learn is what other philosophers have thought. Many of these trains of thought were created during times when we didn't have much to worry about, or in other times when we had a consistent worry about what was going to happen. Each philosopher through history is existing in a time where different circumstances prevailed, where it doesn't necessarily mean that all philosophers thought the same way. We're talking thousands of years of difference in thought patterns, I guess. But ultimately, the reason why we still study these things is because many of these lines of thought are consistent and archetypical. So an archetype is something that exists within our society. Perhaps it's a behavior of humans. It could be something that we do, something that we are. It could have to do with the hero's journey. But these archetypes are basically repeating patterns that seem to surface. And humans will manifest these archetypes in different ways. The hero, the loser, the journey of a human being. But it also comes down to what you consider to be evil or good, which often as a philosopher you have to let go of. You have to let go of what you think to be good and evil. I think that that's really the first step towards a true philosophy in your life, is to forget all about what you've been taught. And this would be the first step being nihilism. And I know that it's funny to me because of all the different mindsets I've studied, often people discount certain ones and accept others. Like, oh, I'm a Stoic, but I'm not a nihilist. No, you have to become a nihilist to become a Stoic. It's a pattern, but it's also a process. In other words, you can wake up one day and say, well, I'm just not going to give a shit about anything and not let the world affect me negatively and just live my life. That's fine. But unless you can hang on to an archetype or a previous philosophy to know where you want to go with that, then how is it actually serving you? In other words, the first step is to let go of everything we believe to be true. Everything. Even if you know it is true in your heart. And then to build it up, your own philosophy based on what you think life is all about. You're going to find out that some people will not agree with you. But is it working for you? That's what's most important. Because ultimately it's a lonely journey. All of our journeys. You will be looked down upon. You will be frowned upon by other people who don't agree with how you think. And that's okay. The worst thing that we can do is to temper how we feel to cater to other people's whims and their bullshit ideas of what life is. All of us are going to have hard times. All of us are going to suffer through anger, stress, frustration. This isn't something you escape through a philosophy. Even the most stoic human being will face times of aggression and frustration. Let me give you an example. A person who calls themselves a stoic. They say, well, I just take everything as it comes. I accept things for what they are. And then your family burns up in a fire. I know that sounds harsh, but that's the extreme example. Now what? You lose your home, you lose your family, you lose your whole way of life. And all of a sudden you have to live up to those standards. Some people lose their fucking minds. They're unable to cope. And so stoicism might work when your life is working for you, when everything is going just fine and going along with the steps of what you consider to be a normal life. But the minute something falls apart, we fall apart. Not always, but that doesn't mean that stoicism doesn't matter. It does, because when I have something happen to me, I always remember these lessons I've learned about what's the worst that could happen. Well, we're all going to die one day, right? You have to be able to embrace that mortality. So part of philosophy is embracing the fact that we're here for a limited time and then we move on to other things, or we don't. That also means we don't know what's coming or what happened before us, that really we're living in this timeline that we exist in, and that we're embracing it as best we can without letting ourselves be affected by all the negativity and bullshit that other people bring to us. Because no matter how stoic, no matter how calm, no matter how aware you are, you're going to have people in your family group, your friend group, and just acquaintances in general that will have a completely different view on life. And instead of scoffing at them, realize that that might work for them, but not work for you. And this is the ultimate discovery in philosophy, that there is no one way to live, that there is no one best way. And also that the old saying, it takes all kinds, it takes all types of people, it resonates as true consistently. We find that we need all different types of people in this world, and that the artist, for example, thinks about things differently than the businessman. It doesn't mean that one is right or wrong. I was thinking earlier about how I'm quite obsessed about, building random things and just creating things out of nothing. This morning I was working on my soldering techniques because I like to learn new things. So I got this, cheap-ass little soldering gun, and I started working on soldering all these different parts that I had randomly together just to understand how it worked. And I got frustrated because I didn't have the knowledge that I needed to do it properly, the way I wanted to, anyway. And I thought about this, how we often fear learning new things, so we just kind of give up on it altogether. But without people who are dedicated and determined to learn new things, we never have new experts. The reason why we have problems with carpenters right now is because there's not enough of them, because we thought of the trades. Society has looked at it as upon it as, well, if you don't go to college and get a good job, you're going to end up in construction. Well, that's a great way to make sure that your colleges don't get built. Construction is an important concept. As a carpenter myself that worked in construction for 15 years, I know that there's a lot of complicated shit going on out there that people just don't understand. You can't build a house from scratch unless you know what the hell you're doing. But my point being that a lot of these things are frowned upon. A lot of the most complicated and difficult things are frowned upon. And carpentry itself, you have to be almost a philosopher just to analyze the different ways to do things. And so don't let that word become a dirty word or be ashamed because you call yourself a philosopher. Own that. Because a love of wisdom is a love of wisdom, regardless of why. And to put it bluntly, a lot of people are jealous of knowledge. And that might sound harsh or arrogant, but it's true. A lot of people really scoff at others who have insight into things because they themselves, rather than learning from other people, decide that they are going to just laugh at anyone who thinks differently because they don't want to take the time in their own lives to actually educate themselves on how to be a better human being for their own sake and their family's sake. The same kind of attitude that allows people to go home and watch reality television for hours on end. It's not about what you watch. It's not about whether you spend time in digital world or listening to podcasts. What are you doing on the internet? Are you in there just looking at some hype bullshit about some new product or some family of reality stars? Or are you researching and understanding different Socratic methods or, studying history? It's all about what you do with your time. It's not about, you got two people looking at their phones at the same time and you think, oh, look, they're just lost in their phone. One of them might be studying how to be a better philosopher or a better human being. We just don't know. It's just about how we spend the time to learn things that maybe are uncomfortable or really we don't understand at first, and continuing along that path to become better people. Because ultimately, we're the only ones who can. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your time, listening to my rambles. If you'd like to get more in depth, I realized a lot of people aren't aware that I have a podcast. It's called 15-Minute Free Thinking, and it's found on all the platforms. I also have another channel called Carpo's Complaints on YouTube, and I opened recently an Instagram account for my Carpo Craft guitars, and you can find me in any of those places. Other than that, I wish you all well, and I'll talk to you next time. Peace out.